Hello, beautiful community and anybody watching. Assassination and attempted assassination is the paradigm of friend and enemy politics. And friend and enemy politics is the enemy of democracy, because in a democracy, we want to be each other's opponents, and political opposition, and this is what Mr. Putin doesn't get, is all about opposition within cooperation. You are my opponent, but we're on the same tennis court, we're playing a game, and I want to beat you within the rules. I don't want to beat you by chucking the racket or my shoe at you. So this is the first most important thing to understand about assassination and attempted assassination. It's the extreme end of the politics of enemies, and as soon as a democracy begins to drift in that direction, everybody has to get 5% more responsible in their own discourse and in the discourse of those around them and those they love. That means that it's important to have clarity and denunciation that political violence against your political opponents is never okay. Is never okay, no matter how much each side feels that the country, the society, or the democracy is on the line if the other guys win. This is very important. This is something that all of you can do if you are American citizens, and 30% of my audience are American citizens here and on the other channel as well. So it's really important to be clear that this is a no-no and that there aren't any buts to it, right? There are no constructive things to say about this. This is a no-no, and a no-no, it is not an act with any liberatory credentials, no matter whose side anybody is on. And now the same applies to everybody around you, right? That clarity that this isn't allowed needs to be encouraged in everybody in your life. And this applies to politics too. Politicians must come out and condemn this, not just on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, but also institutionally. And it's very important that President Biden did come out and indeed made fairly rapidly a good statement. Unfortunately, political violence begets violence. So if you're an American citizen, you need to be prepared that there is a vicious cycle dynamic. And that is why it's especially important for everybody who possibly can tone themselves down to tone themselves down and adopt slightly less existential language about your opponents, even if you do worry that your opponents pose an existential threat. The Russians and the Chinese will always try to exploit this. This is inevitable. When Western societies become more divided, they try to exaggerate that which already divides us. See, the biggest wins for the Russians and for the Chinese is when we come untogether, because they don't have that much power to seed conflict between us that doesn't exist. They do have some power to play into conflict that organically divides us and try to make that conflict divide us more. The most important thing to say, however, is that while attempted assassination is a stress test for political institutions, democratic institutions are resilient. When democracy is in crisis, that doesn't mean democracy is going to collapse. If you know me well, the age-old repeated metaphor, our democracies are coming out of the bay and going into open water. But that doesn't mean that they're going to sink. It just means bits will fly off, there'll be a few existential moments, and it will be bumpy. But crisis doesn't mean collapse. Nevertheless, an event like this does mean that more pressure is put on institutions, because polarization, people treating their opponents as though they were enemies, as though the conflict is utterly existential, that will increase. And it's important that A, you don't yourself contribute to that, and B, that you don't freak out about this. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. There is no point to, incinerate your hair 1,000 times over and over, because democracies are in for a bumpy ride. But there's also a lot of optimism to be had in their resilience. Thank you so much for being with me.